Deshmukh Memorial Lecture. It's a great honor for us that this year's lecture will be delivered by country's eminent journalist, Mr. P.Sainath. So, without wasting more time, may I request Mr. Sainath to come on the dais and deliver this year's Durgabai Deshmukh Memorial Lecture.
Okay, I'll take care of that. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I came here from, around Connaught Place side and was driven past the renamed Planning Commission, now called Niti Ayog, called a lot of other things, but mostly not fit for polite society, rather unprintable. But I was, since looking at the old Yojana Bhavan, remembering the last time I set foot in there, which was to meet that wonderful old man, Professor Madhu Dandavate. And it was such an interesting conversation and has a lot to do with the degradation of data, the destruction of the integrity of data process in this country. I was to meet him, but I had to wait an hour or so because he had been called off to the Prime Minister's office or something. And I was ascending the stairs and he came hopping down the stairs very quickly, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Kill me, I say, I doubled poverty in your country today." And I was mystified. What was he saying? He said, "Kill me, I say, I doubled poverty in your country today." What had happened was that before he took over, a group of those very, very, very clever economists who seemed to abound in Delhi, had done an exercise which had which had brought poverty down to a record level of 19%. If that was true, it means that poverty has risen ever since, because the last official figure for 2011-12 was 21.92%. Okay, so they brought it down to 19%. Don't even ask how it was. It's too inane and stupid to recollect, but it was irritating enough for the EPW, in its very staid avatar, to criticize and say this is most misleading and wrong. So what Professor Dandavate did when he took charge of the Planning Commission was to call for the estimates and put them in the dustbin. So the figures went back to something like 39%, and as I passed him on the staircase, he said, "Kill me, I say, I doubled poverty in your country today." Okay. I think India is in the midst of a serious and severe social regression. When in the nation of Ambedkar and Gandhi, lynch mobs go about killing dozens of people, brutalizing them, smashing people, burning their homes, then you are in a serious social regression. When, let alone not being punished, they are egged on and connived with by their top leaders, then we are in a social regression. When a Dabholkar, a Pansare, a Professor Kalburgi people who brought rational thinking, knowledge to society, who fought superstition, who argued for the spread of enlightenment, of knowledge, when they are murdered and no one is brought to justice, you are in a regression. When the appropriate authority says, which is the district collector and the tehsildar of that area, rule that Rohit Vemula was indeed a Dalit, and a government at the center, a national government, feels the need to descend to such a level to have that finding of the appropriate authority overturned, overridden, to say he is not a Dalit. I mean, that kind of petty vindictiveness and viciousness to someone who has taken his life, you are in a serious social regression. When a society endorses, and I say this with the greatest shame, when a society endorses and indeed rewards what is globally recognized as a war crime, the use of a human shield, as we did in Kashmir, then you are in a serious social regression. When atrocities are carried out like those in Una, for which now 1 year has passed, nobody is punished, but there are 100 other Unas, then you are seriously in a very major social regression. Indeed, it would be correct that many of these things have happened before, but you could see that where they were happening in an episodic fashion, they've exploded. They've exploded. They've grown so wide, so terrible. And the legitimization of this. That social regression is closely tied to the astonishing levels of inequality that we have built in the last 25 years. The nature and composition of our elite has changed. Its attitude, its mindset has undergone major changes as well. There is, believe me, there is incredible discontent across this land. And yet, to an elite who cannot see it because they don't wish to, and those who see it but think it will pass, that discontent seems anarchic, logically anarchic, inarticulate, and very difficult to understand. Actually, it's not. But for those who do not wish to understand, it is. There are none so blind as those who will not see. In the 60s, some major shifts have taken place. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the struggles, the expression, that articulation of discontent, the struggles of the oppressed and the affected, were very often led by those who were neither oppressed nor affected, but those who had a bond of empathy, who identified, who said that this should not happen to fellow human beings and fellow citizens. Yeah, people from the elite themselves. People who did not belong to the oppressed and the affected, but led their struggles. In the last 25 years, we have successfully divorced all these groups. 2.5 decades of atomized individualism and hedonism. 2.5 decades of reforms of various kinds, including of data. We'll come to that. The gulf is now tremendous to the extent that we look at what's happening to people. Very often there is hostility. the way a lot of things like jobs, inequality have disappeared from public discussion. And it's very important with the new announcement that the IT sector, 7 major companies are to lay off 56,000 people this year. Okay? It's important that we don't have a discussion on jobs. Larsen and Toubro, there's a 14,000 layoff. You don't have a discussion on that. You have a reporting on that from the perspective of the company's financial problems, not any one of those 14,000. Okay? And now you have companies doing it, all of whom are making serious profits. Challenging the basis of your market economics and challenging the wisdom of neoliberalism. Lower taxes, give incentives, you'll give people the right to hire and fire and you'll see how jobs will grow. It hasn't happened. And we'll get to that too. But this inequality, this growth of inequality has been deadly. Excuse me. No, why did you open that? Yeah, I'll do it. Just wait. Oh, the display is coming on. Okay, right. Yeah. The levels of inequality, you are today a more unequal nation, and it has grown faster than any time since the East India Company and the British Raj that followed it. Have a look at what Credit Suisse, the major multinational bank, they're not worried about poverty, they track wealth. Have a look at the Global Wealth Data Book 2015 and 2016 of Credit Suisse. And have a look at our achievements out there if you can. Well, I will. That's there. No, it's actually making it small. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. It's okay. It's all right. If you look, the top 1% of Indian society now own 58.4% of all household wealth. That is higher than in any country except Russia. But we achieved it in a shorter period. The Global Wealth Data Book for the year, the figure given for the year 2000 by Credit Suisse's Global Data Book is the top 1% of Indians owned 36.8% of total household wealth. It's now 58.4%. In 2014, it was 49%. In 24 months, the Indian top 1% added 9 percentage points out of total household wealth to their ownership. Compare that with the United States, the quintessential capitalist economy. It is universally acknowledged that the United States is more unequal than it has ever been in history. And the top 1% of the United States own 42.1% of total wealth in the United States. You know what that means, by the way? Among other things, it means that the top 1% of Indians today hold a greater share of wealth in their nation than the top 1% of the United States ever did in the history of that nation. That's how much inequality has grown. And even more tragically, in the last 12 months, when they added something like 5% to their wealth, for the first time in the Credit Suisse tables, the bottom decile, the bottom 10% of Indian society, its wealth turns negative. It falls from 0.1% to minus 0.06%. You can see the figure in the first column, that's the bottom decile. It's fallen from 0.1% to minus 0.7%, arguing or suggesting that those whose liabilities were anyway ahead of their assets are sinking further into debt. That's what it suggests. That's what it argues. Now look at the next two deciles. The second 10% of Indian society, 0.2%, and the third section of Indian society, the third decile, 0.5%. Do you know what it means? It means if you club the bottom 30% together, the bottom three deciles together, the bottom 30% owns zilch. That's what it means. It means the bottom 30% own virtually nothing. That is what that table means. Okay. You can look at the previous year when this was, and you will see that how much it has changed in that time. Note that the closest to us is Thailand with 58%, and everybody else, barring Russia, is way, way behind us. Right? Also this year, I'm very happy to tell you, as you know, we as proud Indians, that the number of, for the first time since the creation of the Forbes billionaires list, India logged $101 billionaires. 101. No less. Now, do you know another interesting thing? If you look at the year 2000, when the top 1% owned 36.8%, there were $9 billionaires in India according to the Forbes list. In 2011-12, we had the socio-economic caste census data for that year. It showed us that 75% of rural households, the main breadwinner, took home less than 5,000 rupees. That year, Forbes counted we had $55 billionaires. This year, we have $101 billionaires. We are fourth in the global rankings of dollar billionaires and 131st in the Human Development Index of the United States, of the United Nations. Fourth in the billionaire rankings and 131st in the Human Development Index. This is your inequality. Oh yeah, and by the way, we've beaten just about everybody on the billionaire stakes. I mean, we've put paid to the pretensions of the Germans, who had the temerity to go ahead of us a couple of years. And of course, between us and the 800-pound gorilla at the top are, countries like Russia and China, and we don't take these guys seriously, right? I mean, the Chinese billionaires' average worth is something like 1.1 billion. Our guys are way above 3 billion, average per capita worth of the billionaires. And as for the Russians, you don't ever take that seriously. I mean, every 5 years, they send all their billionaires to prison. We send ours to parliament. If you look at the Association for Democratic Reforms, the data that's hard-working, body on its thankless task, ADR tells you that from when we instituted the affidavit, which is not an income tax return, it is the self-stated worth of the candidate in an election. If you look at it, in 2004, the percentage of crorepati's in the Lok Sabha was 32%. going by the affidavits of, mind you, this is your self-stated worth, and people tend to be terribly modest when that, yeah. So in 2009, that went to 53%. In the 2014 Lok Sabha, it is 82%. Now these 82% are representing the largest number of poor people on the planet. Can they do that? Yeah. Can they do that? Can they represent 75% of households in rural India where the main breadwinner takes home less than 5,000? 90% of rural households where the main breadwinner takes home less than 10,000. Just 8% of Indian rural households, the main breadwinner takes 8%, takes home 10,000 or more, and that is usually, and if you take Dalits and Adivasis, that falls to about 4%, it falls to about half, and most of those are government servants who earn that kind of income. But you have $101 billionaires. What an achievement. Yeah. That is the moral matrix of your inequality. So you know, it reflects in everything we do. It reflects in this, the kind of inequality that we're talking about shows up in a number of other ways as well. But let me talk about now, what is this? Who are these elites? Before I get to them, before I get to that division, I want to, which is very trivial really. We spent much of June doing the usual recollection of the emergency. Correctly so, you should. But here's the problem. We have spent 4 decades since then ritualizing our remembrance of the emergency, institutionalizing our embrace of it. We have spent 4 decades ritualizing our remembrance of the emergency, institutionalizing our embrace of it. Recalling the terror and tyranny, we do that once annually, while replenishing the toolkit of that emergency every day incrementally. We recall its horrors annually once and replenish its toolkits every day with new oppressive laws, with new oppressive acts, with new oppressive legislation, and simple arbitrary exercise of power. I did not suffer to any degree as an 18-year-old student leader. I did not suffer to any degree what others did during the emergency. I did not. But you know what? My friends and I did not suffer that, what others did. But you know what's important? It mattered to us that others did. That's what was important. We didn't suffer it, but it mattered to us that others did. I was the general secretary of a large students' union down south in Tamil Nadu specifically, where most of us almost completely escaped what was going on up north. And it took time for us to absorb and understand that. But we made that effort because it mattered that others had suffered. You know why it mattered? Because the value and the word justice meant something to everyone, not just to those denied it. It wasn't just those denied justice to whom justice mattered. It mattered to the rest of us. Okay? Today, the affected are on their own. The oppressed are on their own. They have to represent themselves. And there we find anarchic, inarticulate, chaotic, How can these people behave like this? This is no way. And those who try reaching out to them, those who try empathizing with them, those who try extending solidarity to them, well, they become anti-development, anti-Hindu, they become Muslims, terrorists, anti-national, anti-Modi, which last two are the same thing, of course. I'm unable to recall, in the emergency, well, the election that I contested in one was after the ban on student union elections had come. We were asked to report at the police station. We exchanged friendly barbs and a few ridiculous abuses with the police officers, most of us who knew us, and caste and class counted for everything, of course. So we didn't have any problems, and we all went home by, after signing some affidavit revealing our address, which was no great secret. And I am unable to recall this level which I see today. I am unable to recall this level of fear, of intimidation of the intellect and the individual, even in 75, 77, because there were people who spoke up, who did not remain silent. In this hall are people who represented small journals that were shut down during the emergency, but still they spoke. How many of us speak now? I do not recall that level of silence. I recall that people, and yes, there were exceptions in the media, but the media barons, as they always do, crawled when asked only to bend. Now they run on all fours without being asked to bend. Yeah. There are, of course, exceptions everywhere. I make the usual disclaimers, but not only do I not see that level of fear and intimidation in the past, I also do not recall at another plane the level of connivance, collaboration, and action for individual gain and self-aggrandizement that we see today. Something has happened within this elite. Something has happened within that elite. There are the dissenters. There are those who speak differently. There are those who stand up for freedom. But I tell you this, and are there bright spots? No, not at all. Are there bright spots? Of course there are. Is everything bad? No, of course there are. But I want every one of you to understand this, that it's what I certainly believe, and it's what I think is borne out by the evidence, that the artists, writers, poets of this country and the students of the universities have fought for your freedom and mine. They have stood up to be counted as their predecessors did during the emergency, when from field to factory to campus, people stood up to be counted and suffered for it. Today, we're not reaching out and bonding with that. Certainly not on the scale that it happened in 75, 77. Something has changed. We need to worry about what it is that has changed. Who is it that makes up this elite? In today's hierarchy, first, foremost, primarily, and overwhelmingly, the corporate elite. Then, India is increasingly consolidating as a corporate-led state. The corporate elite, and then of course the intellectuals and the government, the bureaucracy, the legislature, executive, judiciary, the significant sections of the professional classes, these are your elite. And of course, all media owners institutionally and strata of journalists individually are also part of this elite, as they were. The members of parliament, those 82% crororepatis, are very much part of this elite. It should also be mentioned, because many of us seem to forget this very easily, that this elite has an extremely strong upper caste bias. Very strong. Upper caste or dominant caste bias. This is your elite. And the role, changes have occurred in the role of each one of these, including, as I mentioned, the media. Yeah. When we had the, every time there is a problem, let's look at, say, the jobs thing that I said we would. Let's take the IT sector, the poster boys of the reforms revolution. What were we told by the great, that time fringe, now mainstream economists? Yeah, the loony center. Lower taxes or abolish them. Give huge incentives. Bring in labor flexibility. Isn't that a lovely word? Stretch the guy's neck until you can throw him out. Introduce labor flexibility and you will see industry creating millions of jobs. If there is any sector where that should have happened, it should have been the IT sector. 20 years of tax holiday. 20 years of tax holiday. And then continued and restructured and reconstituted in different ways, moving from the era of software parks to SEZs, which give you financial incentives, non-financial incentives, suspend labor laws, suspend right to redress, suspend all sorts, suspend disbelief. Okay? Yeah. So if anywhere this should have happened, it should have happened in this. Yet the top 7 companies are laying off 56,000 people this year, is what Hindustan Times, Business Standard, and Business Today and others have announced. Okay? 56,000 jobs. This is apart from what's already gone. Look, something has also happened in that industry. The IT industry produced automation for all the other industries, which could then lay off millions of workers. Today, the automation is applied within the IT industry. For many years, you produced software packages, you produced software tools which helped decision making, which helped me make a decision. Now, you've built the decision making into the tool. So you've got bots, robots, software packages, algorithms. You don't need those men and women who built your industry. Those people whom we romanced in the media. The get up and go of the Indian techie has just got up and gone. Yeah. Now, if you look, all these people are people with EMIs, high education costs. There's about a minimum of 50 to 65,000 that they have to spend on EMIs for housing and education for their children every single month in an increasingly privatized environment. By the way, unlike the earlier industries of steel and others, the IT industry never created facilities. It created table tennis tables and pool tables in its office. It did not create one primary health center in a cyber city, not one. Not even a dispensary. Maybe there was a doctor for emergencies, who spent his time at the pool table, but they did not create that. Everything was given. Where are the jobs? They're going. They've gone dramatically. Here's another thing. None of those companies is making losses. They range their profits, and I think this is, I'm not sure that for all of them it is post-tax, but their profits for the previous year are ranging at the bottom end from 2,800 crore to 23,000 crore for the largest of the companies. Yeah? So they're making money hand over fist and laying off tens of thousands of employees, You tell me what it does to your goddamn economics. What does it do to your society? What does it do to people who constructed your software superpower status? Yeah. What does it do? So where is this in our discussion? Where is this in the public domain? Where is this? It's about the hardships of the company and of the industry and the kind of problems they anticipate from the coming of Donald Trump. You know, but if you think those are the only guys, you're mistaken. Have a look at the media. How many jobs it has laid off. Again, companies that are not necessarily losing money. After the 2008 Wall Street collapse, all your major newspapers kept on crowing about how India has been untouched. Actually, it was relatively so because of your bank unions, which did not allow Indian banks to go the way American banks had gone. Yeah, but we have demonized unions in the last 2 decades. We have finished them, like we did in the media, resulting in considerable loss of independence of the journalist, since there is no one to protect us when we are victimized. Okay? Now, many of profit-making companies, giant media companies, which are really smaller, these giant companies are often very small departments of much larger conglomerates. The old type media monopoly has gone. When you were a big monopoly by yourself in the newspaper world. Now, in the media world, Network 18 is the biggest thing going. But it's a very small part of Mr. Mukesh Ambani's holdings. They'll run it even if it makes losses because they don't want that. But they'll run it because it serves other purposes. It serves other uses. It serves other corporate interests. All of them will continue with that. But look at the layoffs. 6 editions closed by Hindustan Times. Telegraph, 700 jobs at a stroke. In 2008, after the collapse of Wall Street, the media did this thing. They were on the one hand protesting everywhere that India has withstood the recession. I remember one front page on Bombay of the greatest of our newspapers, which said, economy zooms, about 20 zeros. Eventually, we were left with the 20 zeros. Then you had, look, I say this as someone who on September 20th will complete 37 years in the media, in an occupation I love. I've never wanted to be anything but a reporter. I'll say this, the media are the most exclusionist institution of Indian democracy and have become the most voracious in defense of corporate interests. The media are no longer pro big business, they are big business. Okay? And in 2008, in 2009, I had the distinction or the dubious distinction of breaking the story on paid news on the front page of the Hindu. Very little discussion on it. The Indian Express and the Hindu carried stories. Most others simply shut up about it because every major newspaper, every major channel was into that game. Okay? You have a very debased and corrupt media ownership. Be very clear about this. You have a very debased, degenerate, corrupt media ownership that from the 1980s had systematically destroyed the unions, journalist unions, till there is no one to protect the journalist who is independent. When we broke the paid news story, I got a call from one of the senior most Marathi journalists who said, hey, listen, 2 years senior to me, and said, tomorrow you're going to see a big interview with a big minister in my newspaper. you'll find it's under my name. It's entirely bogus and paid news. I said, what happened? He said, when you and I joined journalism, my dear, 30 years ago, there was a thing called the Working Journalists Act that protected us. Yeah, we could not be so easily victimized or thrown out. Today, I work on an 11-month contract, he said. I was still working for a paper that at that time was still adhering to the wage board. He said, you can afford to do these stories. I can't. I'm in the 8th month of a 11-month contract. Yeah, I've got EMIs of 30,000 on my housing loan. I've got 2 kids in college, one looking for a job, a mother in hospital. Do you want me to be a hero, Sainath? I had no reply for him. What would I have done? I don't know. They told him that the interview is already done by a public relations agency. But you know, senior person needs a senior journalist byline there. Yeah. So you improve it, no? I mean, you can make it better, the interview. Put it there. And anyway, the entire paid news scandal also happened. Oh yeah. It was the first attempt in the newspaper industry at a cashless currency. 8 years before demonetization, what they did, they increasingly created rackets where they, like private treaties and stuff. I have a private treaty with you as a company and I acquire 7 to 10% of your shares, which makes me a part owner of your company. When I have 234 such treaties, the question arises, am I a newspaper or an equity firm? And so this was another part of the problem. Now they were being paid for the advertisements in shares. Now what happens when you're paying in shares? The advertisement rates remain the same and the IT department is going to collect taxes on those rates from the newspaper. But the share value is volatile, and when millions of these shares were worth nothing in 2009 after the collapse, suddenly you were holding millions of pieces of paper that weren't worth the paper they were printed on. Okay? That's when paid news came in. You'd think that there would have been some soul searching when the scandal came out. My friend Paranjoy Guha Thakurta and Srinivas Reddy did a 73-page study and report on paid news for the Press Council, a report the Press Council promptly killed because it named names. Later, a newly incoming Press Council chairperson put that up on the website, but after the controversy had died, after the issue had gone, it was no longer hot and hard news. So all those people got away with it. All of them got away with it. So that let's look at some of. I am writing the new. But Madhu Dattavate, the reason I'd got to meet him was to ask him to release my book. And after I realized what he meant by doubling poverty in the country, I knew that this is the only person I want to ever have release my book. And while doing a new introduction for it, I asked the Center for Media Studies, Delhi, to work some tables out of their data. This is what they tell me. You thought that the media don't cover rural India, right? They don't cover urban India either. 67% in 2015, 67% of the front page space of a national daily, I love that word. It simply means anyone who's publishing at least 2 editions, one of which comes out of New Delhi. Then you're a national daily, right? So that 67% of the front page of national dailies, I'm sorry, whether it is Hindi or it is English, the numbers are broadly the same, because it's the same guys owning everything now. That individualism isn't there, that was there 20 years ago. Okay. 67% of the front page of your national daily, 67% of that news comes from Delhi. Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai together make around 9%. 42 other cities exist in India with a population of more than 1 million. 42. Total cities in India with 1 million plus 46 in the 2011 census. 53 if you count urban agglomerations apart from cities, statutory towns and cities. So you have 53 such agglomerations. Most of those never figure on the front pages of these or most other newspapers. And village in 640,000 villages, the share of village level stories, Hindi dailies, and English dailies, 0.26% on the front page. Despite a raging agrarian crisis, despite all kinds of issues and problems, that doesn't happen. Agriculture, 0.07% on the front page of national dailies. My dears, this is a 5-year average, 2012 to 2016. You better buy my book if you want to read the rest of it. Okay, 0.07% is the 5-year average on the front page for Hindi newspapers and agriculture. English papers did slightly better, 0.17%. Television did even slightly better with 0.87%. Well, the nature of the dispersal of TV and its audiences have something to, nobody ever crossed 1%. We are talking about a place or places where 69% of your population live. Okay. Now just look here at, can I get this one? Durgabai Sahib, just for your lecture, see I did this, I took some special effort. It was very difficult for me to get here because of things happening with me in Maharashtra. But Durgabai Sahib gave me one more opportunity to make myself even more unpopular. So I could not say no. I just looked at who, I said, who is our, what is happening on our opinion pages. So we took 3 major newspapers from Delhi, of course, national dailies, and looked at who are the people authoring these articles. In those 14 days, 38 articles coming from that section of society that has captured the opinion pages, foundations, think tanks, corporations directly, corporate funded foundations, corporate funded think tanks, corporate funded institutions, university professors who have also linked with the think tanks. It's a very cozy, incestuous circle. And just, how many? Where is the opinion? Where is the diversity of opinion? Yeah, have a look. I'm just scrolling very fast so that you can't see properly. But just look, 27th June to July 5th, I think, July 7th. Okay, foundation, think tank, other. Foundation, independent foundation, corporate, corporate, think tank, corporate, think tank, university stroke, other institution, think tank, university stroke, other institution, government, bureaucracy, think tank. Okay, these were just picked at random. We didn't take the whole lot. We just looked at how many of these are there, and there were 38. 38. Where is public opinion? These were supposed to be spaces. A good newspaper is a society in argument with itself. That's what good journalism is about. A complete demolition of the space, capture of the space. not only do they own the newspapers, they own the opinion pages. Just look from tomorrow at your newspaper. And many of those, they don't tell you who those are linked to. They just say such and such. By the way, there are foundations which are being treated as, we have built what William Easterbrook famously called the tyranny of experts. Yeah? And we define those experts as corporate experts and neoliberal economists. That's how we define the experts. Okay? That's how we define the expert. And if you look at it, you're not being told who this expert is, what his foundation draws its money from. You are told very prestigious names. Brookings Foundation. Brookings, do you know that in the United States, Brookings has been embroiled for 2 years in a scandal written about in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in New Yorker about conflict of interest and lobbying. But they are presented here as honest experts, detached experts. There are foundations representing arms dealers, okay, who have an interest in the hysteria that we see created every day. I won't even go to television now because I won't get onto that because I don't think my sanity can take it. So that's your opinion. Whichever part of the elite you're looking at, the poster boys of the reforms, the government, the bureaucracy. Listen, you had 2 senior representatives of your, senior intellectual economist varieties in a discussion last year on NDTV with Thomas Piketty, where they famously said that they dismissed the idea that inequality was a big issue. As they said, one of them specifically said, if somebody has made lots of wealth and flaunts it, it's no business of mine. And the other guy dutifully said, I think I'll go with him on this one. Yeah. Now, by the way, even as late as 1993, 94, I do believe, sir, that if the chief economic advisor had said inequality was not an issue or implied it, that chief economic advisor would be looking for a job the next week. Okay? Something has changed. Yeah? You can say this and make a damn virtue of it. You can, of course, he didn't use that language himself. He said, I think I'll go with that. Yeah. 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 I mean, these are the, and then, basically, it's all got to be growth. You're sitting in a country with a mega water crisis. You're sitting in a country with a mega farm crisis. You're sitting in a country where you're pushing a development pattern based on rapid overexploitation of swiftly depleting resources with hugely emerging environmental and consequences, and you still believe in that mantra. You don't even want to discuss what's going on with water. Your water problem in the south is not because of Kaveri sharing. Okay, it's not. Though that is a huge, emotional, gigantic and important issue, considering that the 60% of your irrigation comes from groundwater sources, please know that there are other issues involved. We are destroying the aquifer. We are doing incredibly bad things to our one town in Tamil Nadu called Tiruchangod is the borewell capital of the world. Borewell rigs from that town, which has a population of 60,000, drill at a very conservative estimate 2 billion feet into your aquifer every year. You can see these stories on the People's Archive of Rural India if you will visit. Yeah. And you have this unbelievable, complete blindness to the destruction of resources and environment. David Attenborough put it so beautifully. He said, if you believe in infinite growth in a very finite planet, if you believe in unlimited, unending growth in a planet where resources are dwindling very fast. If you believe in that, you are either an idiot or an economist. Yeah. So, well, many of them are both, right? But, but, but here, in drawing this together, I wanted to tell you that the crisis of the elite is also, look at what we did with demonetization or the cow slaughter. Even when a section begins to whine a little bit, as they did during the demonetization, while at the same time supporting what is an increasingly broken down Aadhaar system, while at the same time, even a few have begun mild whimpers of protest in editorials. I'm not talking about the writers, I'm talking about the unsigned editorials of newspapers on the extension of the cow slaughter ban. You have no idea the damage this has done to people. Of course, why was it done? You don't even have the honesty to say it was done to screw the Muslims. Be honest, say it. That's why it was done. It didn't do that. It finished the Muslims. It destroyed every other section across Maharashtra, from the Maratha farmers to the OBC dalals of the cattle markets. Above all, it finished and destroyed the Dalits who made your Make in India brand long before Mr. Narendra Modi was heard of, and called it the Kolhapuri chappal. Yeah. The Kolhapuri chappal is finished. No hides. No, and you try buying hides from Tamil Nadu, from Krompet, the vans are burned by the Bajrang Dal or the VHP or whoever lays their hands on it first. Okay, the extension of that cow slaughter ban devastated people, and yet even the editorials that are mildly critical don't criticize it on that basis. They say it's bad for industry. Beef exports and hide exports earn so many billion each. Where is your moral position on forcing a section of the population that you will have this diet because I say so? Where is your position on the rights of human beings? Yeah. This is the moral matrix of your inequality. There's a reason why your media, which are no longer your media, they belong to a very few people. There's a reason why they can't do it. The media, okay, I will wind up with this. India is ruled today by a coalition of socio-religious fundamentalists and economic market fundamentalists. It's hard to say which is worse, but easy to say which is the more dishonest. It's the latter, who are such clever, brilliant people and polemicists. And they think they can manipulate the primitives as they see them of the socio-religious fundamentalists. Your neoliberals are riding the tiger. And they haven't crunched their data on how many people have done that successfully and lived to, probably because there's no data, since none of them lived to tell the tale. Yeah. This is the coalition ruling India. Socio-religious fundamentalists and market economic fundamentalists. The neoliberal market economic fundamentalists see those socio-religious. That's why, whatever happens, you cannot criticize Mr. Modi and Amit Shah. You can talk about the fringe and say, Mr. Modi should now bring the fringe in line. There's no fringe, it's the bloody center. It's the core. Yeah? But we still want to keep mouthing this stupid word, a fringe that is out of control. It's a very controlled fringe. Very obedient and disciplined to what is demanded of them. And so the neoliberals see these guys as someone they can manipulate. The latter see these guys as useful idiots who have credibility amongst the chattering classes. right? So you can use them. There you have guys with multiple degrees and PhDs from such famous universities saying that the policies of Mr. Modi and this government are so wonderful, so brilliant, and you can have them defending your finance minister when he says, I will double the income of farmers in 5 years, and no one anywhere ever is required to tell you whether he means nominal income or real income. Yeah, if he means nominal income, well, you can triple it, you can treble it, you can triple it. Real income? Let's talk how you're going to do that by rejecting every recommendation of the Swaminathan Commission, which is aimed precisely at improving the income and conditions of farmers. Lastly, in this, take what do you see in your newspapers? If all that stuff you read in the newspapers about farmers' agitation in Maharashtra and loan waivers, and if all that stuff makes no sense to you at all, it's because it doesn't. Do you think that everything is reduced to the demand for a loan waiver and drought? Listen, some of the greatest numbers of farm suicides have occurred in wonderful monsoon years. They've occurred in periods of bumper crops because price is an issue, credit is an issue, market is an issue. There are many, many other issues. And I want to make this demand, and I want every one of you here, you and I, we are part of that elite we are tearing into, can make this demand. Let us have a 10-day session of Parliament dedicated wholly and solely to discussing and debating the agrarian crisis in this country. In that, let us for 2 days have testimonies from the affected, not from the experts. Let's have testimonies from the affected. Yeah. 2 days, you discuss your Swaminathan Commission report and COP plus 50%. 2 days, you discuss the greatest water crisis this country has ever seen in its history, as far as I can make out nationally, at a national level. Discuss that. Yeah. Discuss the credit system. Discuss whether agriculture should be brought in as a public service so that there's a minimum wage below which it cannot fall. Do you know that MNREGA, the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, 15 states, the MNREGA wage is lower than the state's minimum wage. Yeah. Are you discussing this? Are your expert now? Every night, the 5 clowns on a panel syndrome that afflicts your television, talking about places they couldn't find on a map, yeah, with assistance, yeah, and this is the kind of expert, the tyranny of this kind of expert that you have built up. The farm crisis is burning, and it's not just about drought. It's not just about when we say drought, what does media mean by drought? It means monsoon meteorological failure. India has been having a hydrological drought for 15 years now. We've been having an agricultural drought for 10 years. That's another conversation on what drought means. So there's a much larger crisis than the failure or success of one monsoon. And as you can see, if the rains are normal, then immediately the discussion goes off, though 1 or 2 papers have pointed out that despite normal rains, there's gigantic flooding in the east and the northeast. Something has gone awry in your development. Something has gone awry in the path you followed. Yeah. But your media bosses cannot tell you the truth about a system they are too heavily invested in. They could not, when they lied about the economy being normal in 2009, it was because if they told you the truth about the market, the value of their shares would sink to sub-zero. They are too heavily invested in the market to ever report it honestly to you. Right? So understand that. I am arguing, when you look at your media, and they are involved in everything, from aviation to agriculture to shipping to cement to steel to jute to over 200 activities that I could list. then I argue when they've got an interest in every one of these and it's linked totally to your stock markets, they have a structural compulsion to lie. Yeah, they do. You need to worry about the information you get. What is its quality? What is happening? There are things that you can do, but there are many, as I said, there are many things we could do, starting with that, 10-day session of Parliament. But be very clear about who we are today, what we are today, the kind of society that we are building today, and what are likely to be its consequences if we do not do differently. I want to say again that there is hope, there is plenty. For me, when those artists, writers, poets, playwrights returned their awards, I was so proud of them. Not a single editor of eminence from the English language media turned back any award. I didn't turn one back because I never got one. Well, let me say that I never accepted a Government of India or a state government award ever. So, actually I found myself wishing that I'd had one so I could go and return it. Yeah. Now, you had in the anglicized journalism crowd one Nayantara Saigal, okay, standing up, known persons. Now, I want to tell you this. Those small writers, I addressed the Progressive Writers Association last September in Bilaspur. Many of those who had returned their awards came there. I was so moved when you're a small writer somewhere on the outskirts of Yavatmal in Vidarbha or Gulbarga in Karnataka, for you to return that award. That was the biggest thing that ever happened to you. Okay? And you returned it. What courage it called for, what dignity it called for. Yeah, if there are people like that in this country. Second, the students of your country, whether it was the Film and Television Institute of India, where they had a Mahayudh with Yudhishthira. Yeah, I mean, whether it was that, you still had you had people fighting in JNU, elsewhere, where you and I failed to come out in defense of freedom. These young people did. You know, on June 7th this year, and also I did not cover one issue because we didn't have time, but I want to tell you, it's been going on for 30 years, not for 3 years. The criminalization of dissent. Now we are worried about it because it's burning us. It's touching us, it's reached the elite. It's been going on for 30 years. Go to POSCO, where when I meet Abhay Sahu, leader of the POSCO, they won their battle, by the way. And when I meet Abhay Sahu, I just ask him how many. And he tells me how many new cases have been put on him. It was past 52 or 56 when I last met him. You go to Kalinganagar, an Adivasi couple, the Jarikas, both of them educated with degrees from Cuttack University, never seen a police station, inside of a police station or a cell in their lives, but then they meet Tata's Kalinganagar plan, and between the two of them have 91 cases. Yeah, take Sudha Kumari, I can't pronounce her name properly, in the Srikakulam port struggle. A 78-year-old woman, now she's 82, 81, 82, this much, weighing 35, 40 kilos, yeah, attempt to murder a police party. Yeah, armed to the teeth police party. She can barely hold that sickle. Yeah, and it is morally revolting what we have done. Now, in Koraput, I go and find a chemistry professor in jail. They put a number of cases against him, including theft of a buffalo. He's a chemistry professor. Yeah, and this chemistry professor probably can't distinguish a buffalo from other bovine creature. Yeah, but I asked the then top cop of Odisha, this was some years ago, why? I mean, what is the ridiculous clause? He said, sir, you don't know, these are terrible fellows. You don't understand. I said, yeah, but I don't understand certainly why you have to put a charge of theft of buffalo. He said, sir, we know that many of the cases we put, the court will dismiss. So we put several, one of them must stick. One of them must stick. And what it does stick, because the punishment is not the imprisonment, the punishment is the process. The punishment is when that Adivasi couple have to report at court or police station 3 times a week. That is the punishment. Don't do this. Don't let's do this to our want to be democracy. Don't let's do this. You can, I think, come out and speak up. When you know that what's going on around you is wrong, when you know that we are heading for disaster, speak now. A while from now, you may not be able to speak. Thank you.